podcast, and Drew is looking to see. Hopefully, we are live right now. Currently, um, Drew, you see anything yet? It might be
I, I,
delayed.
I, I don't see anything, but
We're
that's
hoping.
okay.
So for
Oh
today's,
my! I don't see anything.
oh, it's
But
going. It's
that's
going, Drew.
okay. All right, I better turn the volume down.
Oh my!
Sorry for all the listeners that are trying to listen and now they're getting double feedback. I don't think it's going through Twitch right now, but again, might just be a delay. All good. For today's show, we have our free agency roundup. We are officially a week away from free agency. Next week starts up, but we do have some moves that have happened. Mike Evans, Dalton Schultz signed some contracts. Guys getting released, guys getting tagged, and then guys hitting the free agent market. Who's the best? Where's the best fit for some of these guys going to hit the open market? And then we have the AFC and NFC South free agency predictions. We've done the other 6 divisions already. So if you want to go check out your team or a certain division that's on the YouTube channel, go ahead and check those out. And then we are going to have a little free agency draft where we're going to draft a team of only free agents and maybe see if one of them would potentially make the Super Bowl. And then we have a mock draft 2.0, which is my mock draft. If you want to check out the 1.0, that is Drew's. So it's not like, oh, I'm not going to check out the 1.0 because I'm already listening to 2.0. 2 different mock drafts, 2 different people, 2 different opinions. Go check it out. It's up on the YouTube channel. But we're going to go ahead and kick it off with the free agency roundup. 2 guys signed, Mike Evans and Dalton Schultz. Mike Evans signing a 2-year, $52 million contract. That is $27 million a year, $35 million guarantees. It is all front loaded. So most of that contract is front loaded. A lot of the NFL does the back loaded contracts nowadays, but front loading it, I think this affects a handful of wide receivers here. I mean, we're talking Justin Jefferson, CD Lamb, T. Higgins, Michael Pittman are very, very affected by this contract. I mean, even if you wanted to throw in a guy like Calvin Ridley, who's getting up there in age as well. You know, we don't think of him as getting up there in age, but he's about to hit 29, 30. These guys are super affected by this contract. What do you think, Drew? Do you like this contract here for Mike Evans?
Yeah, we talked about this, right, with the salary cap spike and the fact that some of these contracts that are signed in free agency might really front load the contract numbers. It's just another hurdle for these NFL teams to jump through, and the ones that are really good at it will continue to be really good at it, and the ones that struggle, I mean, not to give too big of a preview on the pod, but the Bills are cutting people left and right to try to get under the cap, and then there's certain teams that just continue to be able to sign whoever and do whatever and continue to operate as under the cap teams because of the way they manipulate the salary cap. So for the sake of content and for the sake of exciting stuff happening, I like the fact that they front loaded this contract. I think it'll encourage more teams to do that. But when it comes to a player like Justin Jefferson or some of the marquee free agents, those dudes are getting paid anyway. So I don't really matter. I don't think the cap gymnastics matter that much. Somebody's paying Justin Jefferson. Somebody's paying CeeDee Lamb. Someone's paying Brandon Ayuk. So how it gets done is just the details of something that's already a foregone conclusion.
Yeah, definitely. It's the front loaded. I think that's a little bit different from the contracts that we've seen in the past. It's definitely different. We see all the backloaded stuff. I mean, Tyreek Hill is supposed to take up what 50 something million dollars this year in his cap space. You know, in the previous years he wasn't nearly that much. So, just for the people out there for the cap space stuff, we've had comments on TikToks and YouTube shorts and YouTube comments about cap space and how it works. And it's not like it's just a black and white thing where it's $27 million a year. That's what it is. It's just that's what the average is. When I say it's $27 million a year, again, it's averaged. In reality, we're hitting closer to like, you know, that backloaded contract. It's closer to like $35 million on the back end, you know, and the rest of it's, on the front end and the rest of it's in the back, at least for this contract. So again, it's not all black and white. Cap space stuff can be super confusing. Again, it's not just, oh, well, this is what it is type situation. Dalton Schultz also signed his contract, 3-year, $36 million contract on average of $12 million a year, 23.5 in guarantees. Honestly, when I initially saw this, I kind of wasn't a super big fan. I was like, man, $12 million a year kind of seems kind of steep from. But then I went back and I looked at his stuff. He's 12th in receiving yards among tight ends, 7th in touchdowns, and 12th in receptions, again, among tight ends. And his contract is 12th on a per year basis. So honestly, this is like right where Dalton Schultz needs to be. He was super realistic about what type of money he needs to make. and he signed the contract instead of trying to go out there and go get something larger. Because I'm sure he could have gotten something, but I think he made the right choice here. What do you think about this contract?
I mean, I don't. I guess the money's okay. I'm not exactly sure. Um, I just think that in the NFL there's these top tier tight ends. Only one tight end had 1,000 receiving yards last year. I think there's just these top end tight ends, and then everything else is just like replacement level value.
Mm.
I think maybe that you can. Excuse me. I think maybe you can get the production out of somebody who doesn't cost the money that he might cost, but at the end of the day, he is somebody that has provided value over the course of his career and obviously has played on some pretty good teams. So
Yeah.
You can never really hate investing in a safety valve for your quarterback.
Especially a young quarterback like that. I think every quarterback, especially every young quarterback, needs some type of safety outlet underneath, right? I mean, if you look at a guy like Bryce Young, right, on the other side of the rookies, he didn't. What was his tight end? Who's the starting tight end for the Carolina Panthers?
Who's the starting anybody for the Carolina Panthers? What are you talking about?
It's
There's
just
Bryce Young and there's a really good guy in the defense. That's about it.
Yeah, it's just young guys need the tight ends. I mean, you saw the Packers, super young team, but they have two really young tight ends to kind of round out to give Jordan Love the outlet passes underneath to go along with the super young wide receiver core that's around him as well. So I think it's a good move. Dalton should stay there in Texas, stay with the Texans very specifically. And again, good team friendly contract right where he should be. In other free agent news, Russell Wilson is now released. Now we're looking at the top three quarterbacks for free agency: Kirk Cousins, Russell Wilson, Baker Mayfield, all on the block currently. This is 2 years into his $246.2 million contract.
Life is good.
$85 million over the next 2 years in dead cap. That's a new NFL record. Who's the best or who the potential suitors for Russell Wilson now at this point? I know you said last week with the Kirk Cousins stuff, until somebody signs Kirk Cousins, you like Kirk Cousins with everybody. But what about Russell Wilson? Where does Russell Wilson should land?
He's a Raider, isn't he? Doesn't that just scream Raiders? They're going to go and give him, and then him and, obviously Jimmy G's still technically on the roster, but he screams Raiders to me. And yeah. I mean, if we want this podcast to take off, we need to start stirring up the Raiders fans. I know we've pissed off the Bears fans, and Minnesota Vikings fans are mad at me, but we really need to stir up the Raiders fans if we want this thing to pop off. So yeah, Russell Wilson, come on down to the Raiders. I mean, to answer the question seriously, if Baker back to Tampa is a foregone conclusion, wherever Kirk Cousins lands, that the Russell's going to go to the next place after that. I think that would be pretty tough if you're a franchise that's trying to get Kirk Cousins, because if you have the pieces around him, that's a potential to make it to the NFL playoffs. And I don't think Russell Wilson gets you there. But I also think that this isn't the last quarterback that's going to hit the free agency market. I think that the Patriots, if they draft a quarterback at number 3 or trade back and draft a quarterback, they might let Mac Jones go. Yeah. So, and like it or not, Mac Jones made a Pro Bowl. He's, won some games in the NFL. And frankly, Bill Belichick really didn't surround him with high level offensive coordinator talent the past couple of years. So I think he's a trash can, but that doesn't mean that he doesn't have a career as a stopgap starter somewhere.
Yeah, no, honestly, when we're looking at Russell Wilson, looking at the teams who are suitors, potentially, I don't think the Steelers are a great fit for Kirk. I think, honestly, when you're looking at the front runners, spoiler alert for, again, here coming up soon, the front runners for, best fit for like Kirk Cousins, you're looking at either going back to the Vikings, or you're looking at a place like the Falcons, who have the potential pieces around him, who have a really good offensive line. Just need another wide receiver or two on there. Again, the pieces that the Falcons have brought in, if you look at the contracts, again, goddamn spoiler alert, if you look at the contracts that they have, they really haven't signed a lot of bad free agents. The guys who they have signed, they've played up to those contracts and where they should be. So if Kirk doesn't go to a place like the Falcons, I think Russell should try to go there, because again, that's a really, really good starting point for a quarterback to go to try to be successful. I think the other thing too is what's the market for Russell Wilson? Is he going to want a lot of money? I don't think so. I mean, he's going to want to be a starter, but how many teams really want him to be a starter is the question.
I
Could he go
mean,
to the Titans? Is
it,
that a team where he could go and maybe be a mentor to Will Levis? I mean, is he going to want to do that sort of thing?
I doubt it. If you're a bottom level franchise offering Russell Wilson the bag, and then you're like the Falcons that are offering him $1, go play for the Falcons, man. Like you've already made your money, and at this point, a potential Hall of Fame career is now in doubt because of what happened in Denver. And so if you can sign on with the Falcons, take the Falcons back to the playoffs, maybe win a playoff game, or at least go to the playoffs a year or two in a row, maybe you're ready to ship for what your career legacy looks like. But to just go take a big old fat payday from a bottom tier team and just struggle throughout the season. But he's a weird dude. His teammates don't really like him. There's been so many, Marshawn Lynch and Richard Sherman and all this other stuff. His teammates don't really get along with him. So maybe he doesn't care about winning. Maybe he does. It's hard to say what his motivation at this point is going to be, but he's got a lot of money. His wife is rich. I just don't see how going to a team that's not going to be competitive would be a motivator for him.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. Especially, I mean, when he went to the Broncos, he got so much stuff, right? He got his own private office, and he got his own almost private staff he's bringing along with him. And then Sean Payton comes on, and is like, I don't know what the fuck is going on, but all this shit, get this shit out of here because I ain't dealing with it. And everything kind of went downhill after that. I mean, the minute that Sean Payton stepped on, he's like, I don't like this guy at all. Not even a little bit. He's like, I just don't like him, So there was the shout out NFL Preem on Instagram. He posted all the way back in October about Russell Wilson getting released because of specifically Sean Payton's not liking him and not gelling well in the locker room already. This is all the way back in October, and we're talking about here now in March, and he's getting released, which we kind of knew all the way back in December he was, but still, I mean,
Sean Payton was critical of Russell Wilson on TV before he came back to coaching. So it's kind of hard to escape that.
Right.
And boy, I mean, I wonder if Sean Payton sits there at night and thinks about the fact that the Chargers job came open this offseason and just wonders if I should have just maybe waited another year and then I'd have Justin Herbert right now. That's got to be a thought process in his head. But then again,
sure it is.
NFL coaches are extremely competitive. That's why they do it. It's not for the love of the game. It's for the competitive nature. And reestablishing the Broncos to something great, because that is a historically great franchise when you think about Elway and then Peyton and what they've accomplished in recent years. And to put them back at the top of the pedestal like that would definitely be a notch in Sean Payton's Hall of Fame legacy. So
yeah, for sure. All right. Bunch of guys got tagged, 8 guys in total. We have Brian Burns, Justin Matabuke, Josh Allen, Jalen Johnson, Michael Pittman, Antoine Winfield, which kind of sailed under the radar. I didn't even hear about that one. I had to find that one. T. Higgins, obviously, that we've covered, and L'Jarius Sneed that we've covered as well, all tagged. So, Drew, with these guys tagged, I want to just kind of go through real quick. When I say, okay, Brian Burns is tagged, their next up free agent to get a contract, are they more likely or less likely now to get a contract? So, we're going to start off with the Carolina Panthers. Brian Burns got tagged. So their next top priority free agent is their linebacker, Frankie Louvu, 3 years, $10 million a year. Is this a guy who's more likely or less likely going to get signed here?
I don't have much thoughts on the Panthers and what they're going to do. Even looking for ways for them to save money. It's like, they don't even really have much in the way of saving money outside of maybe Andy Dalton. But, right. I think if you have established talent on that team at this point, you need talent, and anything that's short term. I mean, I would prefer a 2-year deal over a 3-year deal, just because this is a player that's probably not part of your long term future, but you still have to roster these guys. So I don't think franchise tagging him is going to change the outlook on their off season too much. But boy, man, if they could go back and they could redo that trade, they would have sent him off to Chicago instead of DJ Moore. Right. Chicago wanted the pick and a player, and they basically said this player, this player, this player, and they sent off the wide receiver. They should have just sent off Burns at this point because they haven't done much with him. The team hasn't done much. So,
I mean, it's worked out for Carolina though, right? DJ Moore goes off and he gets a career year, and then they go trade for Montez Sweat for a second, right? Or it was a couple late round picks or something like that. And he goes and he pops off. So it worked out pretty well for Chicago, outside of the quarterback situation. Moving on to Justin Matabuke for the Ravens. Their next up priority free agent is the linebacker Patrick Queen. Right now, looking at a 4-year contract, averaging $18.13 million a year. Looking at them, are they more likely or less likely to go ahead and sign a guy like this now?
I think they should resign him. I think that he should have been the priority personally, but they already have a really good linebacker over there, so it's hard to say. I think that for his motivations, the players' motivations, I think he's in line for a big payday. So I don't think that the Ravens would be the most competitive offer on the table. And also the opportunity for him to kind of step in as the star player, the star defender, the star linebacker, as opposed to right now, he's kind of the second fiddle there. So I think it's unlikely.
He's Dre Greenlaw to Fred Warner
with two good Achilles.
Yeah.
I think that it's unlikely that he resigns with the Ravens, but I don't think that has much to do with the franchise tag. I just think that it was never really likely that they were going to invest money in two middle linebackers. You know, the 49ers extended Dre Greenlaw early because they saw the potential and got him at a below market. Well, I mean, linebackers don't make a ton of money, but you can't pay two of them.
Right. No, yeah.
Not when you got a $250 million quarterback.
Exactly. Now looking at Josh Allen getting franchise tag, their next step priority free agent would be Calvin Ridley, 3 years, $18.5 million a year. What do you feel about this one? Because personally, I think regardless of who gets franchise tag or not, I don't think they should re-sign Calvin Ridley.
Yeah, not to reiterate what I just said, but I think Calvin Ridley is going to demand a lot of value, a lot of interest on the free agency. Just because there's not a ton of wide receivers out there, especially, you know, we talked for weeks and weeks and weeks about Mike Evans, and it's like, you know, at least an hour and a half of us podcasting is now completely moot because of Mike Evans. But you talk about these players that may or may not become available. Obviously, when they do or don't, Calvin Ridley is a premier, you know, with T. Higgins franchise, he's the premier free agent right now, wide receiver free agent.
Yeah,
I'm sure there's more cuts to come, but
it's not even about that for me, though. It's not even about the money situation. It's more about, like, yes, you have to sign the guy, but not only do you have to sign the guy, is the trade package that was put in place for Calvin Ridley is the Jaguars lose out on their 3rd round pick regardless because of Calvin Ridley. But if they sign him, they lose out on their 2nd round pick as well. And yes, he did have over 90 catches, 1,000 yards, couple touchdowns. Like, yeah, sure, it's a great season, but he's like 29 years old, and you're going to lose out on a 2nd round pick because of him, and you have to pay him on top of that. It's like you're getting hit in the head 3 times because of the guy. And we're not talking about a top line guy. Like, we're not talking about a guy who's consistently 1,000 yards like Mike Evans or Justin Jefferson, or we're not talking about a top 10 guy here. We're just talking about a guy who's, yeah, probably a 1 somewhere, or maybe a high level 2, but he's not anything crazy to give up a 2nd, in my opinion. You know, that's what it's about for me.
There's also the small, you know, the compensatory picks that come along with the Ravens losing Patrick Queen. Yeah. I don't think Ridley played for them long enough to get a comp pick back, but you know, that's a very, very complicated mathematical analysis of how they do that. Although I think Over the Cap has broken it, and they normally have the comp picks before they come out. But yeah, I mean, I forgot about the 2nd round pick. That changes things big time. I don't know if that's the missing piece over there. There's a little bit of a red flag on their quarterback. Obviously, losing a premier talent at wide receiver doesn't help that red flag on quarterback, but they definitely have some things to figure out moving forward.
Yeah. Moving on to the Bears, you were looking at Jalen Johnson getting tagged. Next priority free agent would be Darnell Mooney. He's only projected a 1-year, $9 million contract. Is this more likely, less likely, or it's about the same to get re-signed?
I mean, I put Darnell Mooney as a player that they could look to re-sign this offseason when we talked about them in the divisional rundowns. I don't think it changes much. Obviously, with a potential 1st round pick quarterback incoming, you don't want to lose talent. I just think you have to decide if Darnell Mooney is the difference maker for you guys or not. Frankly, with the way they're building that team, I think that if the offense can just be capable, then they're going to take a big step forward next year. I'm surprised you listed him though, and not an extension for Mr. Justin Fields.
No, I like to stir the pot a couple weeks in a row, and then we'll let it simmer down. you put the lid on it, you let it simmer for about 20 to 30 minutes, and then we can go in and jump back onto it again.
All right, fair enough.
I don't think Darnell's honestly going to get re-signed. He's a couple seasons away or removed from his 1,000-yard season now. And I think he could go be a good wide receiver somewhere else. I think it's a good reset for him to go somewhere else. And honestly, they're going to bring in another wide receiver most likely, whether Malik Neighbors falls or Roma Dunze or somebody comes in. They're bringing in somebody else most likely with that 9th overall pick. Sure, they can go and they could take an offensive lineman or something. Just depends on how the draft kind of falls or if they want to trade up. I just saw a mock draft today of them trading up to go get Malik Neighbors. So, it's possible, but
aren't they very, isn't that the super, like, obviously Bears fans hate me, even though I like their team. Isn't it a super interesting team to kind of follow right now? Like just what they're going to do with number one, what they can get for Justin Fields, what's going to fall to them at their next pick. Cause I did my mock draft last week and, Brock Bowers slid right past them. You know what I mean? Like it's just one of those things where obviously they have Cole Kmet. He's a pretty good tight end, but Brock Bowers is on a different level. There's potentially a top 10 wide receiver that's going to be sitting there. Like I mentioned before the podcast, I saw a mock today where they moved up and took Marvin Harrison Jr. I think that's a little extreme. Yeah. I'm not exactly sure if 5 years from now the difference between one of them won't succeed. That's the draft. But between Marvin Harrison Jr., Dunze, and Neighbors, the two that succeed out of that group, I think, are probably going to be, pretty similar in production and stuff.
Yeah. Looking at the Colts now, Michael Pittman got tagged. So now the next priority free agent would be Kenny Moore, 2-year, $6.75 million a year contract. A guy who's aging a little bit, a slot corner, more likely, less likely, or about the same for Kenny Moore.
I just think that with a lot of teams trying to get under the cap here going forward, there's going to be a lot of good defensive talent out on the field, and I don't know if you need to re-sign a player that's already coming up on the age where they tend to fall off a lot. On another note, I was surprised by the franchise tag here. Michael Pittman he's a good player, but to franchise tag him with what the franchise tag costs at the wide receiver position it surprised me a little bit. But of course, these could just all be, you sign them to the franchise tag tender to give them more time to negotiate. So it wouldn't surprise me if maybe a long-term extension is announced there, because I'm not exactly sure if he's, top 5, top 10 wide receiver money value. So,
yeah, I would agree with that too. If you look at the next one, Antoine Winfield, this one's the not surprising one because he had to get tagged. The next priority guy up obviously is going to be Baker Mayfield, 3-year contract at $32.5 million a year is what he's valued at currently. For me personally, is it weird to say this almost feels like a borrowed year for Antoine Winfield? Are the Bucs just hoping that the salary cap takes another jump up so they can go ahead and re-sign him? They have Baker Mayfield, have Mike Evans, have the salary cap situation that they do. It's not great. It's not horrible, but it's not fantastic at the same time. This almost feels like borrowed time. You're just trying to buy a little time. Hopefully the salary cap is going to jump up and you can go ahead and sign him next year. But I don't think they're getting a deal done this year, personally.
Well, don't you think that it says big things about what their confidence is in re-signing Baker Mayfield to a long-term extension? The fact that they used the tag on Antoine Winfield, you know what I mean? Because it feels like if they were like, oh, we're not sure about this Baker situation, they would have just used it on him, know. And the fact that they didn't, Antoine Winfield probably would have been a top 3 player on defense if he had hit the open market free agency wise, and probably would have got paid. He's probably pretty frustrated with the fact that he got the free agent tag, but then again, you have an entire year to work out something for him. And
for sure.
That's not a player that it's not a bad thing if you pay a player like Winfield, because he's not just your standard safety. He brings a ton to the table.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. A couple of guys that we've already talked about now at this point, T. Higgins getting tagged. The next up on a priority free agent is DJ Reader. 3-year, $15.25 million a year for the interior defensive lineman. So same question, more or less about the same for DJ.
I think it's about the same. I identify him as a player that they need to bring back. I don't think that changes with tagging T. Higgins.
Yeah.
The hard part with these franchise tags is there's a couple teams out there that it's like, okay, did they tag him to give them a better chance at extending him, or did they tag him because they're thinking about trying to move him, and what's the best way to do that? And the Bengals kind of fall in that category. Franchise tag or not, I'm not sure if T. Higgins is on the Bengals to start the season. So you don't want to lose other important players on your team, because of that tag. So I think bringing DJ Reader back has to be at least a priority to try to get it to where it makes sense. Now, some team swoops in and offers him a ton of money. Defensive tackles are, the 49ers kind of set the precedent on that contract with what they did with Hargrave last year, which might have been maybe not a great decision in hindsight, but he's a good player. I really like DJ Reader. I'd take him on my team.
Right. And then the last one is L'Jarius Sneed and Chris Jones. We're going to have to set the precedent for that one. I think for Chris, this is more likely to get signed. You definitely don't want him to get franchise tagged. We talked about it last week. For the people who didn't see it, you don't want Chris Jones to get franchise tagged. The reason why you don't is because his franchise tag would be $10 million higher than the franchise tag for a defensive tackle because of the amount of money that he made last season. So you don't franchise tag him. But with L'Jarius Sneed not getting a long-term deal currently, Chiefs fall into one of those same things with the Bengals. Could potentially be a tag and trade situation with L'Jarius Sneed, and then Chris Jones getting an extension. I think is pretty likely.
Yeah, I mean, if I'm Chris Jones, I'm just waiting. I'm just gonna wait, just like he did last season, where he kind of held out in the beginning. You got a couple of rings now. Players win.
Yeah,
the motivation. The length of a career on the defensive line in the NFL is not very, very long. So unless they're willing to extend him at market value or above, I think he might just hold out and see what he can, what's out there for him. But we'll see. I mean, there's a couple teams that have a lot of cap space this season, and Chris Jones would make those teams a lot better.
Yeah, for sure. And you have to. I feel like Chris Jones is one of those guys who's kind of quiet and you don't really know what he kind of wants to do. He's already won a couple of rings. Does he want to stay and continue to build on that? Or does he want to go somewhere else and go chase even more money? You know how much money you're going to make from the Chiefs. Again, he's currently at 4 years, $30 million a year. I mean, he's already 32, right? He's up there, right? This would basically make him a Chief for life. This would be essentially, you would think, for Chris Jones, this is my last contract.
It's tough because he has the rings, man. Mm-hmm. Teams will come sign with these teams to try to win a ring, but he's got them twice, and this is his last contract most likely. And nothing you do at this point can tarnish your legacy. Like the Chiefs traded away one of the best wide receivers in NFL history to keep you.
Yeah.
And they won 2 rings off of that decision. Like, your legacy is cemented, bro, no matter what you do. Whether you re-sign with the Chiefs or you go get paid massively elsewhere, it really doesn't matter at this point. Your legacy is cemented. So,
yeah.
But, NFL players are weird. Like, there's not a ton of them. There's not a ton of movement. This isn't the NBA where every 2 years the superstars all change teams. Yeah. So I think the money would be on him re-signing. But if I were him, I would just wait it out a little bit, because of course I say that in whatever time free agency starts, midnight on whatever it'll be. The Chiefs have extended Chris Jones to a 3-year, $110 million, etc. So
yeah,
we'll see. Couple interesting weeks coming up.
Oh yeah, definitely. And then so that means guys who didn't get tagged and didn't get extended currently, we have Saquon Barkley, Tyron Smith, Kirk Cousins, Christian Wilkins, Baker Mayfield, Calvin Ridley, and Marquise Brown. So Drew, I just want to go through these guys. Who are the best? What teams, for the players specifically, where should these guys go? So starting off with Saquon Barkley, where should Saquon go? I have 2 teams here, so if you say one of my teams, I got another backup one. Where should Saquon go?
Why don't you give me your 2 teams, and I'll tell you which one's better for him.
I have the Bengals, and I have the Texans.
Oh, the Texans. Oh, I love that. Can we just make that happen? Hold on. I'm going to get on the phone. I'm going to call my boy D'Amico. Give me just a second. Y'all need Saquon. I love that. I wasn't even thinking the Texans. I'm like throwing all the teams through my head real quick. And I'm like, okay. The Bengals did pop because Joe Mixon may not be there, et cetera, et cetera. You know, I love that. Texans, sign them up.
Yep, especially for a team that has the cap space that could use him. They have almost luxury cap space, right? Anytime you have a good, really good rookie or good young quarterback on a rookie deal, you're playing on luxury money. You're playing on borrowed time essentially for the next couple of years. So sign those couple of guys before you have to sign your quarterback. Saquon's one of those luxury guys. A running back in general is one of those luxury guys that could slide right in, be a perfect fit for CJ Stroud. And I mean, damn, that's a pretty good offense already, and you're just adding on to it.
Yeah, I mentioned a couple weeks back, I still like the fit with him in Dallas. I think they're going to try to go big game hunting at the running back position, whether it's him or Derrick Henry or whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
But honestly, I love the idea of take him to Texas one way or another. I love that.
I wouldn't, as a Cowboys fan, honestly, Saquon, he's kind of a polarizing player sometimes. When he's healthy, he's really good. When he's not, he's overrated. I would take Saquon on the team 9 times out of 10. I wouldn't lose sleep over it, not even a little bit.
The one thing that we do have to keep in mind also is like teams cut players all the time and then re-sign them. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like teams, these players get to free agency and then they re-sign them. They just, I think it just happened with, I'm not going to hold the podcast trying to remember the name, but they cut a player and then they bring him back under a different set of numbers or whatever the case may be. So don't completely rule out Saquon being back in New York. They don't have anything else over there. So that's a team. Yeah. New York is starting to get into dangerous, like Carolina Panthers territory right now with what their roster looks like and their flexibility and all that stuff. And they got a high pick and it looks like they might take a wide receiver. Like that's not a game changing move. Like I know you love Neighbors, but that's not changing their offense next year, especially if you subtract Saquon and add Neighbors. Like your offense isn't getting any better. So we'll see. New York is sneaky on
bad.
Yeah. I don't think it's sneaky. It's just sneaky. Like you got no path to being good in the next couple of years because your only hope is that you're just so bad that you're at the top of the draft again next year.
Yeah, I think you're swinging one way or the other, right? Brian Daboll can either make a miracle happen, and Daniel Jones has a recoup season, and he plays well. He plays like he's supposed to for $40 million a year, or you're bombing completely. It's one way or the other.
Yeah, chances are neither of those aforementioned people are there in 2025.
Yeah. Moving on to Tyron Smith, left tackle from the Cowboys. I have 2 fits for him, the Chiefs and the Rams.
I hate both of those.
You don't like either one of those?
Nah, I'd rather him come to San Francisco.
You want him to play right tackle for you?
1 year, $9 million. Let's go.
I don't know, man. Is he really he's gonna go to San Francisco just to play right tackle instead? He's a left tackle.
Maybe he wants to win a Super Bowl. He ain't gonna win no Super Bowl in Dallas.
I mean, that's why I said the Chiefs, man.
Yeah, I mean, I texted you this during the week. I'm kind of in love with the idea of him right now. If we signed him to be our right tackle and then we drafted, an interior offensive lineman at our pick, all of a sudden the biggest weakness on our team is now, excluding injury, just stacked at that point. You got a young first-round talent at interior offensive lineman. You got 2, Hall of Fame left tackle, a super quality right tackle, and the Rams make a ton of sense, unfortunately, as do the Chiefs. I only hate those because those are competitors of my team. But for your purposes of placing him there, he seems like a player that's probably going to get more than his projection. Probably going to get overpaid, I think.
Yeah, I think overpaid because of the injury concerns. When you look at his rankings on tackles when he's healthy, I mean, you're looking at a top 3 tackle every single year that he's played healthy. But that's the problem, is he's on and off healthy. Even this past year was considered a healthy year, and he still missed 2-3 games.
Well, you love him for a 1 year 9, right? 1 year 10, but you love him for a 338. Like that. That's what I mean. Like I think that's where some team out there, because some NFL teams are just stupid. And it seems like, 3 years, $38 million. That seems like a Raiders thing to do.
Right.
doesn't it? I mean, they're going to have Russell Wilson and him on the line next year. That makes a lot of sense for the Raiders, I think.
I guess it does, unfortunately, but not unfortunately for me. I don't really care, but unfortunately for them. Looking at the next one, Kirk Cousins. I have going back to the Vikings, or I have the Falcons. I already mentioned both teams earlier.
Yeah, I mean, I like him everywhere. I'm a big fan of Kirk Cousins. It's not a secret if anyone's listened to anything I've said since we've started this podcast. I love Kirk Cousins. I think he's a fit. I think he upgrades 15 to 18 teams in the NFL right now. New York could move on. Atlanta for damn sure. Tampa, if they don't re-sign Baker, the Saints getting rid of Derek Carr. There's 10 or 15 teams that would take him tomorrow and they'd be a legitimate playoff threat. So
yeah,
I really don't feel like what I've heard. I don't feel like he's going back to Minnesota. I know that's kind of gotten a little more popular here lately, but they started liquidizing and selling off pieces and stuff last year. And I think they're going to move in a different direction, especially with him coming off an injury. You don't know how he's going to bounce back. So I don't see
but you can
Minnesota.
apply the same logic for Baker Mayfield of not getting franchise tagged. You can use the same logic for Kirk Cousins, can't you?
Yeah, except for he's hurt. It's completely different.
Yeah.
You know how Baker finished. What Baker did the entire season. With Kirk, you're just assuming that what he was showing will bring. And it's different for a team that's down and out to take a risk on that. It's different than the team that's had him to bring him back. Like, we've already done this. It hasn't worked. We haven't made it to an NFC championship game. We haven't made it to a Super Bowl. We're going to bring him back and try it again. That's completely different than a team like the Patriots that have been garbage for 4 years now, bringing him in, or the Atlanta Falcons who think they have Super Bowl talent on their roster, but starting Desmond Ridder. Like, that's a completely different situation. It's a completely different mindset to bring him in, because if it doesn't work out, at least you tried. If it doesn't work out in Minnesota, it's like, why did we do this? We already knew what we had. We already knew what we were bringing back. And I love Kirk, but to me, it doesn't make sense to bring him back and run that back when they're
Yeah.
Are you going to bring back I'll tell you this, if the Minnesota Vikings sign Kirk Cousins, then they need to celebrate, because that means that they're extending Justin Jefferson, because there's no reason you bring Kirk back if you're not extending Justin Jefferson. So,
yeah. Moving on to the next one, Christian Wilkins. I have two fits from. I have the Bears and I have the Raiders.
Man, you're trying to make the Bears lights out, aren't you?
Well, they have the money for it.
I think he fits. I think he fits in a lot of places. I wouldn't even. Yeah. I don't. Tell me, how did you come up with those two teams specifically? Because I feel like there's a lot more than two. What made you settle on those two?
Looking at money and looking at biggest weaknesses, I think that's where you could go. But that's me.
I think any team, any player that wants to get overpaid should call the Raiders, because they don't care about winning. They just want to sell out their stadium.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's evident, right? Like you said, Christian Wilkins can fit in a lot of places. I could say, oh, well, if Dallas can, free up their room, you can go sign there. But, the thing is, it's about money and it's about fit. And honestly, it's about the biggest weakness on the team. And the Bears on their defense, that's the biggest weakness for their defense. And then the Raiders, they need lots of pieces. But I think they're going to go swing for at least one of the big free agents out there. And I think this could be the guy. And then I have, what's up?
It's kind of funny how we haven't talked a ton about the Raiders on these podcasts, but the more I think Kirk makes a ton of sense there. Like, they don't have a quarterback on the roster, and don't come at me with Aiden O'Connell, please. Don't come at me. You guys should have kept your backup from last year, the guy that's in Denver right now. I'm sure you know the name. I can never remember these guys' names. Stidham. They should have kept Stidham over O'Connell, like Jimmy G. Like, I could have told you where that was going. The Raiders, they're a threat to overpay anybody at any time. I love the idea of Kirk Cousins over there. I love the idea of Wilkins over there. So,
yeah. Three more. I got Baker Mayfield going back to Tampa, or in the situation that Kirk doesn't go to the Vikings, going to the Vikings.
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to pay Baker 3 years, $110 million, you might as well just bring Kirk back. I'm not exactly sure. Again, I don't think the Minnesota Vikings, y'all know I think JJ McCarthy's going there. So I'm not sure if paying and extending a quarterback at that amount of money makes sense to them. I think the Bucks, based off of the franchise tag, know what they're going to do with Baker.
Yeah.
And I think it makes sense. He played well last year. I think he's going to get overpaid. I don't expect him to have repeated success that he had this year over the next couple of years. But
Right.
what are you going to do? Let him walk and go into QB purgatory?
Yep. Exactly. Especially with where they're picking. I mean, what are you going to do? I mean, I guess you could take a swing at Bo Nix or Michael Penix, but yeah, no, I agree.
Well, that's the problem with a team like that. When you're good enough, it doesn't allow you to draft a player high enough. I mean, they're like pick 26 or 27. It just doesn't, it doesn't allow you to pick a high enough talent to change anything at the QB position.
Yeah. Calvin Ridley. I have the Giants and the Jets, 2 New York teams.
It would make sense for the Giants. They got to do something.
Yeah, and especially either one of the teams, they obviously both need wide receiver, right? That's part of it. But it also just makes sense because I'm working under this assumption, and I'm working under my mock draft assumption that potentially they stick with Daniel Jones for this year, and they're running with it, and they're building off of it. So you get Calvin Ridley. You might bring in a wide receiver and free agency, besides that, but I think that's where you go. You might build up the offensive line and in the draft. That's my assumption of what I'm working off of.
What's the projected contract for Calvin Ridley? Is it number one money?
3 years, $55.5 million, 18.5 a year, 32.75 million in guarantees.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's a lot of money.
It is. I mean, you're creeping to what like T. Higgins is projected. And T. Higgins is like 5 years younger. So, yeah. And then moving on to Marquise Brown, I have 2 fits. I have the Chiefs and I have the Colts.
Yeah, I think the Chiefs are going to be in on every wide receiver that's available. I think they're in on pretty much anybody, but I think that Marquise Brown and Michael Pittman for the Colts, that's an interesting wide receiver combo considering what their quarterback situation is and his skill set as a young, essentially a rookie because he barely played quarterback next year. I kind of like the fit there. I think the Chiefs are going to be in on everybody, but I don't know what to say about Marquise Brown because with the injury to Kyler Murray and the circus clown rotation of quarterbacks they've had over there in the past couple of years, it just seems like his career has completely fallen off the cliff, but that doesn't mean that it has. It's just weird quarterback production.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this to foreshadow a little bit. DeAndre Hopkins, I think, is a major cut candidate for Tennessee. And assuming he was a free agent right now and you could bring in Hopkins or you could bring in Marquise Brown, where would you, for a team like the Colts, for a team like the Raiders, who with a quarterback situation over there, bringing someone in opposite of Devontae, who would you value? Would you value? I mean, obviously, 2 former player teammates. Would you value one over the other?
Yeah, I would. I guess it just depends on the team. If you're talking about like the Colts, the Raiders, the Chiefs,
I feel like DeAndre Hopkins is going to be a Kansas City Chief. That's kind of like my pocket signing for the Chiefs. I think he gets cut for cap savings and the Chiefs get him because, we laughed. We're like, what the fuck are you doing going to the Titans, bro? That was stupid. And then he had a good year. So
yeah, he did. Yeah. Depending on the team and depending on how you play, I think Marquise Brown could probably be a bigger, just because of the burner factor, right? That's why you have him going to the Colts, right? You draft Alec Pierce a couple of years ago out of Cincinnati because you want him to be the down the field burner guy, and he's just not. He's not that guy. But Michael Pittman's great in the short and intermediate, possession type receiver, but they don't have the burner right now. So you go out and you go get a guy like Marquise Brown, or you draft one. You get a lot of Brian Thomas Jr. getting drafted there, or you take a guy maybe in the second round who's a burner. You got lots of burners in the draft every year.
One specifically from Texas.
From Texas, yeah.
Pretty fast. Shockingly fast, you might say.
Yeah. I think depending on who you are and what team you are, I think that's where you got to go personally.
Every time something exciting happens, I feel like this sense of anxiety that I have to text you about it before you text me about it. Because I'll see something. It's happened twice now where I see something and I open my phone to text you about it, and your text is already there. I'm like, like, don't you have a job? Like, shouldn't you be doing something right now? Like, I want to share the news with you.
All right. Well, that gives us a wrap up on the free agency pool so far. Obviously, next week, Wednesday, when we record, we are going to be actively breaking news as we record and live streaming. I think that's going to be a pretty exciting time for us. So stay tuned. 3:00 next week, same time. We're going to be doing the same thing.
Do you think that we're going to have concrete Justin Fields news by next Wednesday?
Yes.
And do you think if they're going to trade him that they wait for the Kirk Cousins, Baker Mayfield, Russell Wilson domino to fall to see which team is desperate enough to trade picks for him? Or do you think the teams that are most desperate would fill their openings and then all of a sudden his value isn't as high?
You know what? Actually, I don't know. Because the whispers right now is that the field on Justin Fields right now, the want on Justin Fields is not as high as initially thought, and that they're not just trying to field out the playing field and trying to figure out who's the best fit and who gives the best package. Is just the packages suck because nobody's interested. That's the whispers right now, is nobody's really that interested in Justin Fields, and if they are, you're not getting the second round pick that you thought you were. So they might wait for that and then just wait to see who is desperate enough to go ahead and go get Justin Fields, right? If you're Atlanta and you miss out on Baker Mayfield and you lose out on Kirk Cousins, you can't even bring in a vet like Ryan Tannehill, are you going to play Taylor Heineke all year, or are you going to go try to go get, Justin Fields? I think that's what they are kind of waiting for right now, because again, not on purpose waiting for. I think they're waiting because there's not really a huge market for Justin Fields right now.
I think if I'm Atlanta, I just take the quarterback with the pick at that point over Justin Fields. But right now everybody's talking about, Dallas Turner to them, or what, he's an okay edge rusher, but it's not Will Anderson. You know what I mean? He's not Aiden Hutchinson. He's not Nick Bosa. So if you've struck out everywhere and you're thinking, oh, I'm going to trade a pick for Justin Fields, just take the quarterback.
Yeah.
I know that everybody thinks that JJ McCarthy apparently has to sit for 3 years, even though he was a 3-year starter in college. He's not ready to play day one, according to all these Minnesota Vikings fans. But, and just so you know, based off of what your team did last year, that's the only thing that can happen for them next year. The Minnesota Vikings were terrible. Yeah. They led the league in passing attempts because their running back was terrible, which means they're definitely going to lead the league in passing attempts this year. They're not at all going to try to establish the run. They're not at all going to try to get a more 50-50 dynamic. They're just going to lead the league in passing again. That's why they cannot draft J.J. McCarthy, because he is not ready to throw the ball more than 22 times a game. Yeah, guaranteed.
Yeah.
Per the Minnesota Vikings fans that reach out to me on TikTok.
I love it.
Honestly, it makes me happy that I don't I know that podcasting is the way to go, and terrestrial radio is dying. If Sports 1140 or ESPN 1320 reached out to us and hey, we need you to host a radio show, of course we'd say yes, right? Because it'd be exciting. But the stupid people that we'd have to talk to all day that would call in, and I see it on X, I see it on Twitter every single day. Fire Steve Kerr, he's an idiot. Fire Steve Kerr, and I'm just put the phone down, Grandpa. Just relax. The Warriors have now won 1 million games in a row, and they're shooting up the standings, and they're playing good defense again. Just freaking relax. He's a Hall of Fame coach. He knows what he's doing. These people in the comments, stay out of the comment section, people. That's my recommendation for the day.
Yeah, no, don't worry. I read it from the comments about Joe Mazzulla as soon as they lose a game. I'm just bro, really? Come on, get off of it.
Do you even know the Celtics, bro? Do you even know what they're trying to accomplish, bro? Do you even watch ball, bro? Your glasses are too thick, bro.
Dude, you don't even know what Boston wants.
Yeah, you don't even know what Chicago's trying to accomplish.
Oh, man. All right, moving on to our NFC and AFC South free agency predictions. Once again, this is the last part in our free agency predictions. If you want to go see your team or a certain division, go back on the channel. And
let's get it.
they're all going to be there. Starting off with the AFC South, we have the Texans, the Jaguars, the Colts, and the Titans. Starting off with the division winners, the Houston Texans have $66.5 million in cap space. Number one cap candidate for you is who, Drew?
My boy Jimmy Ward. Definite kind of cut candidate there. Another year older. D'Amico's a big fan. Because he's a big fan, it might be Robert Woods. Robert Woods didn't bring much to the table this year, and he's what's he making? 13 million.
Yeah, he has $4.9 million in savings this year if you cut him. Obviously June 1st.
That's a lot of money for someone that didn't do much on a team that was really good offensively last year.
And a team that you're looking to build off of offensively on top of that as well. So, I guess if you want to go ahead and keep him around because he's a really good blocking wide receiver, I guess, but I think the guys that you have on the team, like Nico Collins, Noah Brown, I guess Noah Brown's a free agent too, but those type of guys are already scrappy enough that they are going to block. So it kind of depends. But to me, Robert Woods, $4.9 million in savings is mine. I have two for the re-signing candidates. I'll go ahead and
go because we're going to have the same one.
Well, I'll take the non-obvious one. I'll take Blake Cashman, linebacker. 2 years, $8.5 million, $4.25 million a year, $5.25 million in guarantees. Played really well. You'll look at his statistics, go look at his grading. All top 10 numbers, and a guy who's going to fly under the radar and is not going to command a whole lot of money, and a guy that you want to go ahead and keep on the team. I think Blake Cashman a guy who is going to be a signing that no one's really going to bat an eye at, but I think he's going to make a huge difference for the Houston Texans.
Yeah, I'm a little concerned about Sheldon Rankins and the contract, but that defense continuity. Wow.
Continuity.
Wow. X-rated podcast here. Whatever the hell I'm trying to say, you know what I'm trying to say. I think you got to just bring back the defensive players, and start building under D'Amico. So I think he is someone that they should try to bring back. You build defense in layers, and if D'Amico's building the defense the way that the 49ers built their defense, they build from the defensive line back. And so keeping your defensive line strong is important.
That's your re-sign?
Yeah.
No love for Jonathan Grenard? I thought that was the one that you were going to choose. I mean, it's a lot of money to command for the edge rusher. I mean, it's a 4-year, $72 million contract, $18 million a year. I mean, granted, he's played well for the last 3 years. So is it the money thing for a guy like Jonathan Grenard, or is it someone who just kind of went over your head a little bit?
No, it's not that. It's just that when in the modern day NFL, you can't pay two players at the same position. No team pays two corners, no team pays two wide receivers. Like it's all very, very rare. And with Will Anderson over there, I just think that the Texans could sign Chase Young for a below market contract, and he would bring the threat needed on the other side of Will Anderson to allow him to be good. So I honestly, I don't know. They're going to re-sign him, I'm sure. I just honestly didn't even put much thought into that, because I'm kind of trying to find things that aren't like, oh yeah, they need to re-sign Brandon Ayuk. Podcast over. You know what I mean? Like they need to re-sign CeeDee Lamb. Podcast over. You know what I mean? But I just think that you can bring, when you have a premier edge rusher, which is what Will Anderson feels like he's going to be, you don't have to spend a ton of money at the opposite end of him, because you just need somebody that's a threat.
Yeah, I get it. And when you look at my free agency targets, I don't have any edge rushers on here. I have one defensive guy and one offensive guy. I'll go ahead and let you take the first one for the free agent targets.
Well, I'm going to still Saquon Barkley, bro. I'll just go with that.
That's the one that you're going to go with?
Yeah, I love the idea of that so much. I'm just going to leave that there. Saquon Barkley.
I have two. So outside of Blake Cashman, who was their highest rated linebacker, Their linebacker spot was pretty weak, so I think
Oh, don't do it.
a team that has the money for it, bring in a guy like Patrick Queen, 4 years, 72.5 million, and
I'm gonna be a
total
Texans
contract.
fan, bro. I'm gonna be a Texans fan. Saquon Barkley and running back Patrick Queen at linebacker. I'm just gonna root for a team that can maybe beat the Chiefs because my team can't. So I might just
Right.
jump ship and I'm gonna be a Houston Texans fan.
And the other one is I have Trent Brown, tackle. They did have a lot of offensive line problems, so 2-year, $15 million contract I think would be perfect for this type of team. Give them a little bit of breathing room until they rebuild that team through the trenches over the next couple of years.
Trent Brown is not a tackle that can play the zone read, the zone run game that they have over there. Obviously, the Shanahan offenses ran over there, but they also don't have a starting running back currently. Ish. I mean, so there could be some modifications. So I'm not exactly sure if he would be my fit at tackle, but an upgrade is an upgrade.
Yeah. I used Michael Winu last week, so
Mhm.
and he has 4 position flexibility. So I
That's
was
the
like,
problem
I'll
is
just use a different one.
we're to the last of the divisions, so it's hard to keep trying to think of different players and different
Right. You're not
every
building a
week I
team
bring
off
up
of
Kirk Cousins. So
right. You're not building a team off of the 200th ranked free agent. Jacksonville Jaguars, $19.6 million in cap space. Number one cut candidate. I have 2 here. I think they could cut Zay Jones and save $7.7 million in cap space. You can go find a similar type wide receiver out there in the draft, the free agent market. You can go find that type of production anywhere else. I don't think Zay Jones moves the needle for me to try to keep him. It's just not that pressing for me. There was another guy I had too, but I want to see if you have anybody else first.
I think they actually have quite a few. Who else did you have?
I had potentially they could move on from Cam Robinson. He's played okay the last couple of years, but it's like $17.2 million in cap space saved. He's making a lot of money for a guy that plays okay. Like, who are you going to go ahead and replace him with is obviously the question. You could try to do that through the draft, obviously, or you could pay a guy a lot less to get the same amount of production for agency. I'm not a big fan of Cam Robinson. Again, it's a guy who plays all right. It's not that big of a deal to me.
I mean, I think they could keep Zay Jones and cut Christian Kirk and save double the money, and then Rayshon Jenkins at safety. Christian Kirk. I mean, unfortunately I wrote down what he's making, not what the cap savings would be, but I think Christian Kirk's making $17 million.
Somewhere around there.
Rayshon Jenkins is making almost 10, and he's a 31-year-old safety. So, But just the thing about it is you look at these high priced players on defenses that weren't that exciting. Look at what the Bills did today. Their defense wasn't that good, and they shed a lot of it today.
Yep. Yeah, no, absolutely.
And we nailed most of those. By the way, for the viewers, we know what we're talking about.
Yep, most of the cut
except for when it comes to the Bears.
Yeah. Most of the cut candidates that we've been naming off have been actually cut. Re-signing. Do you have anybody for re-signing for the Jacksonville Jaguars? Because I had a hard time trying to look through and see if I had anybody as well.
I mean, outside of Ridley, obviously.
Yeah. My cat is screaming in the background. Apologize if you can hear that. Biggest free agent targets. 2 guys, 1 offense, 1 defense, both with the last name Williams. I have Leonard Williams on defense, 3 years, $51.75 million contract. And then on offense, they have a prom at center. And Connor Williams.
You and your offensive lineman.
See, here's the thing. I really like the Connor Williams fit here specifically because a guy who's been projected to Jacksonville in the draft over and over and over and over and over again is Jackson Powers Johnson. Well, guess what? Kick Connor Williams back out the guard like he's been playing his whole career, and it works out perfectly fine. Both those guys could play guard or play center, and you have that flexibility, and it doesn't really make a difference. So I like that guy there, and obviously the Leonard Williams thing again, just needing help on that defensive line is what I got. Who do you have?
I think that they need to bring. I think they need to bring someone in at corner, and that would be a fit. I don't think they're going to be in the market for like a Tre'Davious White, but I know I keep mentioning this guy, Akella Witherspoon, Avante Maddox, who was cut today, a player like that. Hell, even this Gilmore, like that might be a fit for them. And then on the offensive side of the ball, they got to sign someone. They got to get someone at running back. I love Travis Etienne, but they need to bring in somebody to spell him a little bit, because much like the Cowboys found out this year about Tony Pollard, when he's the every down back, it really loses some of the home run big play ability.
Yep.
Because they're carrying the ball every down. So I'd like them to bring someone in. I don't have a name right off the top of my head.
There was just already reports today that I think it was the GM who said that they're going to cut back on the Travis Etienne snaps. That you should see probably a lot of Tank Bigsby, who they drafted a lot next year, or if they bring somebody in, you're probably going to see a lot of that too.
And offensive tackle also, because they just lost what's his name? Juwan Taylor? Is that his name?
This year or last year?
Maybe I'm misremembering. I don't know.
Getting to that age already.
Yeah, I'm getting old, guys. I'm getting old. So I think corner and running back for them for sure.
Yeah. We got the Colts 45.
Not to replace Etienne, obviously. Just
just as you need a 1-2.
Right.
Colts at $45.1 million in cap space. Lots of cap. Cut candidate. Who you got?
Mo Alley Cox.
Bang. Yeah, that's what I got. $5.9 million. That's the only one I really even had, to be honest. Honestly, most these there's only one team going down the line and looking at it. There's only two teams that I found that you can cut two guys. Most of these guys, it's like, okay, well, you cut one guy. Like, that's what's really going to save you a lot of money. Excuse me while I sneeze. Re-signing, I have re-signing Grover Stewart, 3 years, $33 million, $11 million a year, $21 million in guarantees. I think that's a guy that you should probably hang on to. Yes, he is a little bit older. I think he's 30, 31, but he's played well the past couple of years. You look at what he's done, you look at his grading, you look at his statistics. Everything looks good with Grover Stewart, and I don't think you need to weaken up that defensive line, especially when you're getting trade talks potentially of a guy like DeForest Buckner because he's in the last year of his deal. You want to keep at least somebody out there, and Grover Stewart, I think, fills that role perfectly fine.
Yeah, I like Grover. I like Grover Stewart. Kenny Moore is a young corner, and not young. He's like 27 or 28. But to be honest with you, I know this may be kind of obvious, but I think they should probably bring back Gardner Minshew.
Yeah, I thought about that one as well. I think that unless he, because of the way he played or has been playing as a backup, he thinks he deserves a little bit more money.
He might be a sneaky. He might be one of those guys that are sneaky, like out there. I think that there's a market for like a Sam Darnold this year. So if Sam Darnold has a market, then Minshew Mania definitely has a market because he played well.
Yeah.
Ish.
Well enough.
Well enough.
Well enough.
Well enough that someone will overpay him because that's what NFL teams do, right?
Exactly. And then once again, I have two targets, one on the offense, one on the defense here for the Colts. You want to go ahead and take your biggest targets? What do you got?
Colts.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I think we already covered it. I think they need. Before the Michael Pittman franchise tag, I would have said wide receiver number one. They've obviously tagged him. I think putting somebody opposite of him because some of their other players haven't worked out. Backup running back, I think, is a sneaky important position for them because I'm not sure about Jonathan Taylor's health going forward. Yeah. I don't know much about the Colts defense, but I'm sure they could use any one of the Leonard Williams or the Danielle Hunter or all those guys that are out there right now. So, but offensive side of the ball, just somebody that is a change of pace behind Jonathan Taylor, but at the same time can handle the workload if they have to.
I have Chidobe Awuzie, corner.
Yeah, see,
coming over.
Cheeto.
So yeah, so I have him coming over to help out with that cornerback room. Even if they retain Kenny Moore, that doesn't move the needle for me. He's a slot corner, while Chidobe Awuzie is an outside corner. So I think that fills the role really well. And the other thing I think that this team needs, especially if you're cutting one tight end, is bringing another. Bringing a guy like Hunter Henry can really help out a young quarterback. We were just talking about that tight ends help young quarterbacks or safety blankets. And I think Hunter Henry can do that for Anthony Richardson. So those are my two guys there.
I'm a big Hunter Henry fan.
Yeah.
Ever since he was with the Chargers. So I think he'd be a good fit for a lot of teams.
Yeah, definitely. Tennessee Titans, last place in the division, but they have the most amount of money with $69.7 million in cap space. Number one cut candidate I have is Andre Dillard, $6.4 million saved, but I was really scraping to try to find a cut candidate. Do you have another one?
DeAndre Hopkins.
Yeah, I know you mentioned that one. Yeah, so Hopkins. I know Hopkins saves what? Hopkins saves quite a bit of money, doesn't he?
Yeah, it's a lot of money, and also like if you're gonna let Derrick Henry go, who spoiler alert will be my re-sign candidate for this team. If you're gonna let Derrick Henry go, what are you keeping DeAndre Hopkins around for? It just, either bring back the players that are gonna best suit you to win, or move in a different direction. So, to me, I don't think you keep. Maybe you don't have to cut DeAndre. It's hard to find a cut candidate for a team that has a ton of money, but at this point, what's the future of that team?
Yeah, DeAndre Hopkins is $16.35 million in saved. Yeah, you would only
money.
You would only retain $1.9 million in dead money for cutting DeAndre Hopkins. Yeah, I didn't realize it was that much dead money. Like small amount of dead money, I should say. Yeah, wow. Moving on to the re-signing, you already brought up your Derrick Henry re-sign. I'm going to throw out Aaron Brewer, their center. 3 years, $20 million is what I got. So Derrick Henry, Aaron Brewer. I don't think Derrick comes back just because of his end of year speech that he decided to give to the fans.
So, yeah, I'm ignoring that for the purpose of this podcast.
It never happened. You never saw it.
I mean, if they cut DeAndre, then they need wide receiver, right? They need some offensive line help. They need cornerback help, and frankly, they need a linebacker. An underrated re-signing, I think, would be Azeez Al-Shaair. Played middle linebacker for him last year, and he's a really good player. I kind of hope that Azeez hits free agency and kind of waits around to see what Patrick Queen gets, and then, comes home after we cut Dre Greenlaw, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah. My biggest targets are I have three trench guys. Your favorite, dude. You love the trenches. Offensive line was horrible. Tyron Smith is out there. And you have Danielle Hunter on the other side. And then if you don't want to sign older guys and you want to bring a young guy who's maybe going to play on a 1-year deal, bring in a guy like Chase Young.
Yeah, the Tennessee Titans have Chase Young and Tre'Davious White written all over them.
Right. Yeah. They're a team that needs a lot. And it's like, where do you start with this team, right? With teams like this, what I almost want to do for next year is pick out a couple of teams, right? The worst teams. Let's take the 10 worst teams in the league and let's rebuild those teams from ground up, because I can say, oh yeah, let's go ahead and bring in Chase Young. But in reality, what is that going to do for him in the big picture? If we build the entire team, then now we're looking at something that's going to be good in a one-off season type situation. So,
yep,
that's your AFC South. Your Houston Texans led AFC South, and they're going to continue to lead for the long future, I believe. Now moving on to the NFC South, we have the Bucks, the Saints, the Falcons, and everybody's favorite Carolina Panthers keep pounding. Starting off with the division winners, Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They have $17.7 million in cap space. Cut candidates, I have two of them. I think these two are the most obvious ones. I have Carlton Davis, who got paid, and he's played piss poor, $14.3 million in savings. And there's another guy who doesn't even play snaps for him. I don't know if you're going to say him.
Well, I was going with Carlton Davis.
Russell Gage.
Oh, yeah. That thing with Baker where he was like, well, apparently they don't watch us because he hasn't played since such and such. That was pretty funny.
So Russell Gage is $10 million saved, and Carlton Davis at 14.3 million saved. So, and it's not like your cornerback room is going to be empty. You still have Jamil Dean, who's playing really well. Is definitely outplaying Carlton Davis, who's making a lot more money than he is. So, I think those two cuts aren't going to hurt you.
I think if you cut Carlton Davis and you cut Shaquille Barrett, you save a ton of money.
Yeah, I think Shaq's probably going to get cut.
Shaq's not terrible, but he's 32, 33, makes just under $20 million. It's a lot of money for a position that your production falls off massively at that age. Did it surprise you today? Here comes the podcast hijack. I'm famous for this. Did it surprise you today that they restructured Von Miller instead of just cutting him with the personal issues and everything? Also,
I think that's the big thing is the personal issues.
I mean, we talked about it during the season if he might just be let go, and obviously that didn't happen.
Yeah. Sorry, my cat's going crazy. Yeah, I think that with Vaughn, we talked about it earlier in the year. I mean, we talked about week 14-ish, 15-ish, where I feel like it was our number one, our first podcast, second podcast. We were talking about Vaughn potentially getting let go. So yep. I think he is. I think he was a prime cut candidate in the fact that he wasn't as. The Bills, I guess, just believe in his ability to continue to run at 34 years old or however old he is. So surprising, but I mean, you saved $8.6 million, but still, dude, I mean, you could have saved more than that by cutting him. So
definitely an interesting decision, to say the least.
Tampa Bay Bucks, obviously, you have the re-signing of Baker is obviously probably going to be the number one for everybody. But outside of Baker, do you have another guy for them to re-sign?
Yeah, I mean, so much relies on them. Not relies. That's the wrong word. But so much of what they're going to do kind of dangles on what they're going to do with Baker. Obviously, he's their probably most important free agent. They got a couple of their linebackers that are free agents, but I don't think the conversation has to go much further past Baker and what they're doing with him. Obviously, with the Mike Evans thing finalized.
Yeah, and I also have Levante David too. He's aging. That's probably going to be a guy that they're not going to want to see in another uniform. He's still playing at a decent level, and they're not going to bring back Devin White, so probably going to bring back Levante in my eyes.
But why do you think that why Levante over Devin White?
Because Devin White's been benched because of his attitude. He's been benched because of his performance. He's not a very good player. He's younger and is gonna command a little bit more money than Levante. I don't think they have any loyalty to a guy like that. Personally. What about their? What's
go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just gonna talk about their free agents in terms of who they could bring in. Who do you have for the Bucks?
I mean, I think the Bucks' biggest weakness, obviously, is quarterback right now because they don't have one on the roster. But with the franchise tag to Winfield, they sewed up safety, and it really just depends on what they want to do with the draft. Because I think that interior offensive line for them and cornerback. Obviously, we talked about Carlton Davis. So it kind of just depends what they're going to do. If they go offensive line in the draft, then they go cornerback in free agency. If they go cornerback in the draft, they can go offensive lineman in free agency. But between the draft and the free agency, I think they're going to sew up both those positions, interior offensive line and secondary.
Yeah. I
know that's lame because I didn't pick up players, but I keep mocking the same, your boy Cheeto, that's can they get his production at a draft pick? Sure. Then there's a lot of, Laken Tomlinson, from the Jets. I don't know if he's even been cut yet, or if he's a cut candidate. But a player like that makes sense. So,
yeah, it's they need a lot of their problems come from their offensive line, their defensive line, especially if you're going to cut a guy like Shaq Barrett. What's his name? Something Joe something. Their rotational edge rusher they got some good stuff out of another young player. I always forget the name of him as well at the end of the year, but it's That's what they need. Jadeveon Clowney is a guy that they could bring in for short term. Robert Hunt on the offensive line as well, because a lot of their issues come from guard. They had their center announce his retirement after really not playing all last year, Ryan Jensen. So I think that's where the issues come into play. And I didn't want to use Connor Williams again for center, but he could be there too. New Orleans Saints, negative $21.1 million in cap space. Our only negative cap space that we have for today. Cut candidate, number one guy. Who's your number one guy for cut candidate?
Alvin Kamara.
Really? Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Why?
Because your team's not good enough to be spending so much money at running back. Like it just doesn't matter. Derek Carr is a trash can. You can cut. Is it Marcus May?
Yeah.
I got that right?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like you got to get back to a point of flexibility. You have to be a flexible franchise. You have to be a flexible organization to be able to make moves to get better. And whatever you got to do to get better is what you need to do. So Alvin Kamara at his age, it's not. I would cut Derek Carr and just start Jameis Winston. Like Derek Carr, the book is out on that dude. It is what it is. Like he had a good year for the Raiders like 6 years ago. It's a wrap on that dude's career.
Yeah. Yeah, cutting Taysom Hill, in my opinion, is probably pretty large as well. Jameis is a free agent, so bringing him back, that's my number one free agent re-signing for them. 1 year, $4 million.
Stole the spotlight.
No, that's all right. So bringing him back, the thing is with Derek Carr is you're kind of stuck with the contract. What's really funny about the Saints is we've known the Saints for a little while now to be in cap hell, right? They're always in cap hell. They could have been out of cap hell if it wasn't for Derek Carr last year. If they didn't sign Derek Carr to this contract, they would be out of cap hell, and we would be talking about the Saints potentially looking for a quarterback. They would be like the Falcons, right? But they're not. They're in cap hell, and they have Derek Carr, and they restructured the deal that basically seals them up for this year and next year as well. They're pretty much stuck with Derek Carr for the next 2 years, and they can do nothing about it, and that sucks for them. But you dug your own grave, and now you're going to go ahead and have to sleep in that hole that you dug yourself, that you were already almost out of. You redug the hole. You were backfilling the hole, and while backfilling it, you dug another hole, and you got into that one. That's what you did. So, again, cutting Taysom, signing Jameis, I think is the top priority for them. What about their free agent signings? Who do you have for free agency? Because, again, this is a team that could use quite a bit of help.
I don't even can they sign anyone?
That's I think problem. I couldn't really put anyone down.
If you cut Marcus May, if you cut Alvin Kamara, if you cut the Honey Badger, if you cut Demario Davis, do you even have flexibility at this point to even name a top? Like NFL teams are going to sign guys, right? Like they're going to get somebody, but I don't even know who you
break even, honestly.
And the craziest thing is like their biggest opportunities at this point are like quarterback and left tackle. And it's like, if you tell me a franchise that has a ship without a rudder, it's a franchise that doesn't have a left tackle and it doesn't have a quarterback. Like you don't have a QB, you don't have a left tackle. They don't even really have a left guard. Right. So it's just the whole left side of their offensive line is washed. Their quarterback is washed. Their running back is old. Their tight end is barely an NFL player anymore. It's just, you got Slant Boy over there who did nothing last year. And then in the midst of all of it, you got Chris Olave. And it's just like, that sucks for him.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't even know if it's really worth naming free agents for the New Orleans Saints, honestly.
I know we're not going to do this as a segment, but if there was a segment called the 2020 podcast, the 2020 podcast guesses who the next top 5 players to demand a trade are going to be, I put Chris Olave really high on that list because that franchise ain't got no way to go forward. And why is he going to want to waste the young part of his career over there? You see these NFL teams, these NFL wide receivers, they get frustrated, and he's got, the corpse of Derek Carr underthrowing him, or he's got half 10-20 vision Jameis Winston overthrowing him. It's just not good. Not good over there for Chris Olave. So,
yeah, no, for sure. All right.
And listen, Saints fans, before you come at me sideways, not only do you got the worst cap situation in the league, and the Chargers exist in this scenario, I think the next closest team to you is like $25 million away. Like, not only are you terrible, it's not even close how terrible you are. Like, you're super terrible. So, hey,
Yeah.
you know what? New Orleans Saints fans, congratulations. You're number one at something, and that's being the number one team in cap hell this year. So kudos to you.
Atlanta Falcons, $31.6 million in cap space. I personally did not have a cut candidate.
What about
for this
Taylor
team.
Heineke?
But they need a backup, man. It's not Desmond
They got
Ridder.
Desmond Ridder.
No, fuck Desmond Ridder. No.
Desmond Ridder's going to back up Kirk Cousins. What are you talking about?
Oh, you got to have someone solid to at least back you up.
What about Jonnu Smith? What do you need a backup tight end for? The only reason why
he's the one who played all the snaps. He got all.
That's because what's his face is an idiot. It has nothing to do with him. Oh, he's a great tight end. No, it's Arthur Smith is a moron. That's why.
Yeah, no, I get that, but I mean,
what about one of their 12 running backs they have? They could cut Cordell Patterson. They could cut. Sure. Obviously they're not cutting.
It's not going to save a lot of money to cut Cordell Patterson, though.
I know, but we got to put something in the segment. It can't just be like this. This team is so talented they can't cut anybody. This is like when I said the Cowboys can cut Brandon Cooks or they can cut, D-Law because that would save a massive amount of money. Is it likely to happen? Probably not, but that's something they could do to save up money. Why do you hate on my boy Desmond Ridder? 7,000 passing yards in a Madden season 1 year.
Hey, I was a believer in Desmond Ridder. Is Cordell Patterson a free agent? Because I don't even see Cordell Patterson.
Ah, shit. My fault. He probably is.
And then they have 2 rookie running backs.
Whatever.
Or on rookie contracts, I should say. I was like, damn, did I miss that? I'm like, that would have been a cut candidate for sure.
I think Jonnu Smith is a free agent also. Maybe he's a restricted free agent.
He might be.
Cordell Patterson is definitely a free agent.
Yeah. What about re-signing guys? I only have one guy for a re-signing.
Who you got? Don't say Calais Campbell. He's like 57.
I have Calais Campbell.
God, he's so old.
Bro, he's so old, and yet he's still a really good run stopper, and he had 7 sacks last year. I mean, you bring him in on a 1-year deal, man. I mean, screw it. Like,
all right. I would re-sign Jeff Okudah.
Yeah, maybe.
Because you're going to get him so cheap, and he's like 24. And I know he's bounced around a little bit, but you just fired your head coach. You're bringing in a completely different scheme. There's no reason to go up on young talent when you're, bringing in a completely different situation. What you could probably get him for like 318 or something small like that. Like it's not going to be much because he hasn't done anything.
Let's see.
Calais Campbell, he's like 52.
Hey, it's fine. It's fine. He's fine. Jeff Okudah is projected. I don't even have a projection on Jeff Okudah.
It's that bad, huh?
It's that bad.
He made like $8 million this year, because it was the last year of his deal or whatever. But I don't believe in giving up in young talent, especially when you're going through a roster turnover and a switch completely. Nnamdi Asomugha sucked for the Eagles, right? But it was a scheme thing.
Yeah,
we got to fill the segment. Okay, fine. They'll bring back the 40-year-old, the Falcons Super Bowl talented roster. With no quarterback.
If it makes you feel better, my biggest free agent signing is not a guy in the trenches. So
let's go. I'm excited.
They need to bring in a wide receiver. I think they need to bring in multiple wide receivers because they have like almost nobody on roster outside of like Drake London. That's a wide receiver. So I think bringing in mentioned him earlier. Bringing in Marquise Brown would probably be good for the team because it's a change of pace guy. Drake London, Marquise Brown. I think that's a pretty good combo though, and maybe draft a guy. Maybe spoiler alert.
Yeah, and Drake London fanfare, but he hasn't done anything yet.
Yeah.
So not for sure for certain number one over there. So I like wide receiver for Atlanta. That makes a lot of sense. Couple of defensive pieces make sense too. Obviously, they got a pretty good young safety, and
I also have Andrew Van Ginkel too.
That's true too. And they're bringing back the corpse of Calais Campbell for another 7-sack season. He's going to be like that Madden player that's still playing when he's 47. So yeah, I mean, wide receiver makes a lot of sense for them actually.
Yeah. Last team, last place, and the entire NFL. Wow, isn't this fitting? Our last team is last place in the NFL, Carolina Panthers. talking about the worst team in the league, and you have $9.8 million in cap space is
Well, that's
pretty
fine. You
sad.
don't need cap space when you're the worst team in the league because that means that you're drafting really high, correct?
Yeah, I mean, unless you trade away your draft picks.
Well, if they traded away the draft pick that would have been number one in this draft, they would have got someone really good for it, right?
Yeah, unless he's just not working out.
No, that can't be possible. And I know, I haven't watched the Panthers in a couple years, but I know they had this player. He was a superstar running back for him, Christian McCaffrey. I know that they have at least a third and a fourth round pick at the very least for Christian McCaffrey, correct?
Nope.
Oh my gosh. All right. Well, Panthers, you're fucked.
$9.8 million in cap space. You could cut probably 98% of the team. But Dante Jackson, $10.5 million in savings. And then also have a lineman as well. Austin Corbett, you could also save as well. So $6.2 million. But they're tied up a little bit with some of their contracts because they just recently signed some of those guys. So
Austin Corbett, Shaq Thompson.
yeah.
And like I said early, Andy Dalton. Who was the first one that you said?
Dante Jackson.
Dante Jackson. Yeah, he makes more than 10, right?
Yeah, 10.5 in savings alone.
Yeah, I mean Xavier Woods. They could probably. The thing about Xavier Woods is he's young. He makes less than $7 or $8 million. So it's just
he plays well too.
And you gotta. I did an AI search earlier.
Mm-hmm.
For like I wanted it to give me like the oldest player. I just pulled it up. I was looking at it. I wanted to give it the oldest player on the roster that made the most amount of money that was a cut candidate for each team because I wanted to bring like a different like spin to this one because we've done so many of these. And I got to the Chiefs and Travis Kelce was their cut candidate. And so I just like deleted the AI. I'm like, all right, that's broke. Like obviously didn't structure that correctly. And he does make $15 million this year and he's really old, but come on.
Right.
So yeah. I mean, all I came up with for the Panthers was Andy Dalton. And just you're paying him $6 or $7 million for what?
Yeah. And then you could re-sign the linebacker, Frankie Louvu. He's played well, 3 years, $30 million. So you could if you want to, but if you're going to let him go because your team isn't ready to do any type of competing, totally understand that well. Honestly, re-signing anybody you could really throw anybody out the window because I've already franchise tagged Brian Burns, obviously. So there's that. What about free agents?
Yeah, I mean, re-signs. I had Jeremy Chin. I'm kind of a fan, and then I don't think you want to shed all your offensive talent. I mean, DJ Chark isn't like. Oh, who's he throwing the ball to if DJ Chark is gone?
Adam Thielen.
Oh God, Adam Thielen! What a joke.
He had 1,000 yards and like 90 catches. It's like the first time he's done that since like 2019. Funny enough. And I only know they played that well because he was still sitting on my fantasy team, my dynasty fantasy team that's been going since like 2019. So, there's that.
I think that the Panthers should pick up the phone and call the Bengals and see what it would take to get T. Higgins. I know that's not a free agent, but he was a free agent. And if it was last week and we were talking about this, I would have said T. Higgins. And I just don't feel like I think we've already talked about the Bengals not necessarily keeping him. So for me, I think that would make sense. The Panthers need a number one wide receiver, and they need an actual number one wide receiver, like somebody that can do it all. He can run the routes. He can take it deep. He's a big guy. You can run the pop screen passes to him. Like you got to get creative and innovative with that offense. You need to get the ball out of Bryce Young's hands and into the hands of playmakers. So T. Higgins, it would be somebody that I would be very high on them trying to get.
Yeah. Well,
I would also trade Burns. I would send him out ASAP for whatever you could possibly get for him. Because what's the point of tagging him and paying him next year? It's not going to make like if you can get a second round and a fourth round pick for him and just add young talent. This is the point where anyone on that roster over the age of 29 just get rid of it all and start over.
The problem is I don't know if they can even. They can get that for Brian Burns, yes, but will they want to take it is the question because they had like an offer on the table from like the Rams or something for 2 first-round picks for him like literally a year ago, and now they're gonna think, well, he just had a career year, he's worth of 2 first-round picks at least, and everyone's going to be like, no.
How stupid does that sound? They had 2 first-round picks for Brian Burns. They have no first-round pick in this draft, and they just stupid. There's a reason why through the course of history, certain NFL franchises are always at the top. They're always at the top. Like certain teams year in and year out, or like, the Chiefs have Patrick Mahomes, but let's not pretend that the Chiefs weren't a stable organization. But before that, we like to clown on the Cowboys. We do. We as in me. But every year, motherfuckers are talking about the Cowboys and their Super Bowl hopes. We're I know it's a poverty divisional franchise, like you like to call them, but every year the hope is there. Since 2012, except for 3 years with a Tom Sula, Chip Kelly weirdness that I don't know, Jed York bumped his head and got confused. The 49ers every year, they're talking about the fact that they're going to go deep in the playoffs. When was the last time we said anything positive about the Carolina Panthers, except for one miraculous season by Cam Newton?
2015, yeah.
Who we're not supposed to talk about on this podcast.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and it's year after year, right, with other franchises too. When's the last time the Raiders have been good? 70s?
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, outside of pop random years here and there, but yeah.
Wow.
Early 2000s.
The Bills they freed up all that money to sign Mitchell Trubisky.
I told you right before the podcast started that they were reaching out to sign him, bro.
And they signed Taylor Rapp. Yep. You're a Bills fan today. You're looking at Tre'Davious White is gone, Poyer's gone, all this stuff, and they're like, "Whoa, we signed Mitchell Trubisky."
Yep.
Boom. We signed our all-star corner to sign Mitchell Trubisky.
It's the MVP, not the MVP. He's the MVP. Okay.
What's that?
The Nickelodeon Most Valuable Player.
That's true. I totally forgot about that. That's excellent. All right, do me a quick favor for those watching us on YouTube. I think we had 3 viewers the last time I checked, so that's what's up. We got to get a thumbs up on that video because that's what they say on all the other podcasts. And for some behind the scenes, sometimes Jacob has to carry the podcast while I run to the bathroom, so he's going to do that now and take us into the next segment. So
do you want to go? Wait, hold on. Do you want to do we're at hour 30. Do you want to do the free agency draft, or you want to just go in the mock draft?
This was a lot of free agency talk, and we talked about everybody for the most part. So let's just hop into the mock.
All right, I'll go ahead.
Be right back.
Share my screen. All right, for the viewers, I am currently pulling up PFF, the mock draft simulator. I think it's probably the best mock draft simulator out there. Currently, years past, we used a different one, but they shut that one down for some reason. It was going through a full revamp last year, and it never happened. Sad times. All right, and I'm just going to go ahead and pull up one as well. There we go. Mock draft simulator. Okay, you guys. If you are listening only, I am currently sharing my screen right now. All right, let me go ahead and minimize myself, minimize Drew, and we are full screen on our mock draft simulator. If you're live, first pick in the draft, we're not going to do anything crazy. We're going to go ahead and draft Caleb Williams to the Bears. I don't want to hear nothing about the Chicago keeping Justin Fields. It's just not going to happen. This is a predictive mock, right? This isn't something that I would do personally. Even if it was something I would do personally, I'm taking Caleb Williams, right? And for the second overall pick, we got Drake May going to the Washington Commanders. Again, nothing crazy. We're keeping the same old status quo. Now,
wow, you're really mixing it up here.
Right here, this is I know Drew went for the Marvin Harrison Jr. I'm not going to go anything crazy here. I'm going to go with Jaden Daniels.
You're a bum.
Yeah,
I'm so convinced that the Patriots aren't going to be picking here.
I don't think the Chargers will be picking where they're picking.
Ooh, okay.
I think they'll trade back. I think someone's going to want to get in front of New York to pick a quarterback. I think that's where I personally stand. But obviously, no trades, no funny business. We're going just straight what the order is, which never happens.
Just straight chalk.
Straight chalk, right? Are we doing anything crazy here? No, we're taking Marvin Harrison Jr. Because why would you ruin your entire draft stock by not taking Marvin Harrison Jr.? Okay, and for the 5th pick, you have to go solid, dude. You have to go Joel Alt. You can't take Brock Bowers with the 5th. If you trade back and you go closer to like the 8th, the 9th, the 10th, 11th, 12th, like if you go back further into the teens and then you take Brock Bowers, I'm cool with it. I'm okay with it. I'm solid. I'm all right.
Who's the most likely team to jump up in front of New York there? Minnesota?
Minnesota, you have the Falcons if they don't land anybody. The Raiders, I think, are a big
Well, with the news today, obviously the Broncos, right?
Yeah, that too. I just think that. So here's the thing: if Jaden Daniels is still on, if he doesn't get drafted by the Patriots right here, and he's still available, obviously they're not picking a quarterback, right? The Cardinals aren't picking a quarterback. If he doesn't get drafted here, I think the Raiders could jump up. They have a Jaden Daniels and Antonio Pierce connection. He coached them in Arizona, I believe it was. So you have that connection there, jumping up to 5th to go ahead and try to grab a franchise guy. But me personally, I don't think they're doing that. I think the Patriots are going to pick their franchise guy. You don't know how many times you're going to be able to get in this realm, in this region. As much as I'm not a fan of Jaden Daniels, at the end of the day, it's the reality of the situation. People believe in this guy. They believe in the tools. They believe in the running ability. They believe in the arm. They believe in it. I know I don't, but again, I think you got to take it.
I just feel like the Patriots should look at past the recent history here, and just because you're picking high doesn't mean that player deserves to be picked there. You can just take a 5th round pick and call the Cowboys and trade for Trey Lance if you really want a quarterback that was drafted way too high.
Yeah.
I know everybody's mocking him there. It's so hard for me to reconcile the Patriots doing something like that without realizing like they're not the Patriots anymore. This is a different team. So.
Yep. On the clock, New York Giants, 6th pick. I am working under the assumption that you are protecting Daniel Jones. You go out and you grab a guy like Calvin Ridley. You beef up your pass protection. You can go ahead and slide him over at right tackle. You take Evan Neal, you slide him inside to guard, and you can pick up another good interior offensive lineman either later in the draft or in free agency. And I think you have a revamped offense that gives Daniel Jones the chance. And if he doesn't get the chance and he messes up, you can get out of that contract and go grab somebody else at a later point, and your building blocks are now there. I think Fashanu apparently is how you say it. I was just aware of it's Fashanu. I've been saying Fashanu, and I've heard everybody say Fashanu for so long. Apparently it's Fashanu. He's way too good of a prospect in my eyes. He's my OT1. He's OT2 going here in this draft. So I know there's talks of Troy Fontanu or Talisi Fuaga going up, but I think Olu's a little bit too good. And here at 7th overall, I'm going Malik Neighbors. Malik Neighbors to the Tennessee Titans. Yes, I know that they have a bad offensive line, but I think that you also need wide receiver help there. I think that's especially what's been stated very recently is not only do you bring in the guy who's coaching the Titans now, Callahan, his dad is now the offensive line coach, is one of the better offensive line coaches in the league, and he can make do with doo-doo essentially. And I think that kind of pushes up the Malik Neighbors conversation to 7th to the Tennessee Titans a little bit harder. So I think that's something that they need and somewhere that they need to look especially. And
I think this is actually a great spot for them to be sitting, because if one of the top 2 tackles falls, if one of the top 2 wide receivers falls, Bowers is still sitting there. There's just so much they can do at this point. They're guaranteed a player that's going to make an impact for them at this pick. And it's not, you get to the Falcons here and everybody's talking about fit, and, there's a lot of weird things going, but that Tennessee Titans pick is really, really a good pick for them, because they can go a lot of good options and they're guaranteed a high level player any of the options they go to.
And the thing is people who trade up in front of them, it doesn't affect them.
It does not.
Right. It doesn't matter. So yeah, they're sitting at probably one of the better spots in the draft where they could just wait and see what falls to them, and they're fine regardless. Atlanta Falcons, we're not straying away from the wide receivers We're going to go ahead and go Rome Odunze
That breaks my
to
heart for Chicago.
the Falcons. Yep. So Chicago doesn't get their wide receiver 2. I think, again, we talked about it earlier. The Falcons really only have Drake London, who, as Drew has pointed out earlier, who's really unproven. Drafting another guy high like this, Rome Odunze, to a roster that, again, does not have a lot of wide receivers is something crucial to whoever's going to step into quarterback for them at that situation. So at 9th overall, I had to go back to my notes and make sure that I was picking the right guy.
Oof.
Cornerback 1 comes off of the board. Terrion Arnold. They just tagged Jalen Johnson. Yes, I know. Not big guarantees that you can bring him back. Obviously, you want to bring him back. But who do they have besides Jalen Johnson? The rest of their cornerback and their cornerback room is not very good. I think corner is one of their biggest issues for the Chicago Bears. A lot of it's covered up by their pass rush because their pass rush is so good. The corners need a little bit of help, and I think Terrion Arnold steps in and helps them out instantly. And I have 10th overall, Talisi Fuaga going to the New York Jets. Offensive line help. Don't really need to see too much about it.
I thought the Jets had a good offensive line. Just kidding.
I was like, according to who? Why? Because they have Mekhi Becton, your favorite player.
We're gonna get Aaron Rodgers some help here at number 10. I don't care what happens in front of this. I think outside of like Marvin Harrison Jr. falling to 10, no matter what happens here, they got a stud at wide receiver. They got running back. I think they really need to invest a lot of capital in offensive line, draft wise and free agency wise.
So we have the top 10 picks now. Caleb Williams, Drake May, Jaden Daniels, Marvin Harrison Jr., Joe Alt, Olufashanu, Malik Neighbors. You have Rome Odunze, Terrion Arnold, and Talisi Fuaga. What do you think about the top 10? Any comments or any issues with anything so far?
Yeah, no, congratulations on having the most predictable and boring top 10 in the history of anything. I think if we took all the mock drafts, stuck them in a blender and spit them all out, what the most likely outcome was, I think you've nailed it. So the good thing is we know that the NFL never does that way, and your top 10 is guaranteed to be a pile of shit by the time the draft comes because at least 3 of those teams won't be picking there. So
yeah. Now we have obviously Minnesota Vikings. Not going to change it from Drew's.
Do it.
JJ McCarthy.
Let's go! He's ready to play, suckers.
Oh man! And with how
number one passing offense last year, apparently number 1 passing attempts. They'll do that again.
With how the board has fallen, I think that the Denver Broncos get screwed a little bit. I think they hope that JJ McCarthy falls. I don't really know if they have a lot of draft capital to move up. But I think that something that they need help on big time is that defensive line. Byron Murphy going to the Denver Broncos, I think he is going to go pretty high. I mean, there's even talks about him being the first defensive player off the board in general, over Dallas Turner, over Terrion Arnold, over Quinyon Mitchell, over a whole bunch of guys. I just got done watching Byron Murphy's tape, by the way, and talk about a penetrator. He's not a guy who's going to take up a whole lot of room or space like a T'Vondre Sweat, but he's gonna penetrate the line, and you're looking for pressures up the middle and collapsing the pocket. And I think Byron Murphy gives you.
How much time would you say you spent watching another man penetrate on this Byron Murphy guy?
Quite a bit.
At least we know what you do in your spare time.
Yeah, how long is this? About 3 games. So 3 games is usually what I watch for guys' tapes.
This is the first mock I've seen where he goes this high. I kind of have him in my mind. I'm in love with him at the Texans pick, but probably if the fact that I'm in love with him there means that he's going to go higher than that. So that always seems to be what happens. Yeah. I think the Broncos would love to go quarterback here, and that really sucks for them if JJ McCarthy gets snagged up. But again, we talked about this last week when I had the Broncos pick. And that was before they cut Russell Wilson. Obviously, it becomes a little more clear if they can go quarterback here, but they need a lot of help everywhere, and it's kind of like the Tennessee Titans. It's a good chance for them to get a quality player.
Yep. Yeah. Bingo. And with the Raiders, what do we know about the Raiders? They like guys who have high RAS scores. And no, I'm not going to take Xavier Worthy. I thought about it. a guy who had the highest athletic score, testing score in the cornerback draft is Quinyon Mitchell. He ranks number 1. I like Quinyon a lot. And I think he's a guy who you look at him, he's big, strong, tall. He's very lengthy. I like Quinyon a lot to the Raiders, again, especially with that athletics testing score. I think that's somewhere that Las Vegas can definitely go.
I've seen that a lot. I am going to dabble a little bit on the gambling of the NFL draft, and I think there will be some money sprinkled on that guy going at that pick. So yes, I agree.
14th. This is a super popular pick for any offensive tackle that's available, but I'm not going to go that way. I'm going to stop the slide of Dallas Turner going to the New Orleans Saints. You don't have any other edge rusher outside of I'm forgetting his name, Cam Jordan, who's aging and his play is starting to slip a little bit because of that age. I think you brought in an edge rusher a couple of years ago at the end of the draft, and it didn't work out. And honestly, dude, if you look at the Saints' early draft picks from the last couple of years, they've been pretty bad. I mean, you were talking about like Trevor Penning hasn't worked out, and that's a big reason why you're looking at tackle for this spot. Trevor Penning was never going to work out. I hated Trevor Penning coming out. He sucked. He was super raw, and his athletic ability was not that impressive. I just did not like him. You know, there's athletic guys in this tackle group coming out that I really like that we're going to see. But I think Dallas Turner is a pick that has to go. Edge rusher help has to go for the New Orleans Saints.
Well, I think if you're the New Orleans Saints, you have a plan here to go tackle. But if a player like Dallas Turner falls into your lap, you just have to go at that point. You know,
Yeah.
when a Jalen Carter slides so far, it doesn't matter what your game plan was for your pick at that point. You just have to take the player.
Yep, I think that's what it is. And this is kind of the earliest I've taken him, but I feel kind of comfortable with it. And I'm going to go ahead and go with Cooper DeJean to the Indy Colts. This is under the assumption that Kenny Moore is not being re-signed. If you don't want to bring him back and you want to bring in a guy like Cooper DeJean who can play the slot, he can play outside, he can play safety, he can play what you want him to play. But guess what? He can only play one position. So pick and choose on where he's going to play. We're going to see Cooper DeJean, in my opinion, play probably at all 3 of those spots in the first 3 years of his career, very, very, very early, at long periods of time, not just in sporadic plays. I think this is a good gadget guy you can kind of put all over the field who's high in athleticism and high in skill too. Now, going to the Seattle Seahawks, I think you need offensive line help, but I think you specifically need a guy who I think is more of a guard than a tackle. J.C. Latham, you can play him at guard and you can do the whole, you play him at tackle. You could do the tackle and fail thing. I'm totally okay with that. I would much prefer a guy get played at tackle and then fail and go play at guard the next year. But I do think J.C. Latham is more of a guard, in my opinion. I think we're going to see him year 2 start playing guard a little bit more. And that's a team that has a pretty bad offensive line and needs that help. And I think he fills that role pretty well. 7th. JPJ, Jackson Powers Johnson, going to the Jacksonville Jaguars. Again, Luke Fortner is not a very good center. You're going to be looking to replace him. Jackson Powers Johnson falls to the spot. I think you got to take him. And I think one of the more popular picks, Brock Bowers to the Cincinnati Bengals.
Ooh.
Yeah. So
yeah, that would be great for Joe Burrow.
Yeah. So I know that you need obviously offensive line help, and you can go with a myriad of guys, Troy Fautanu, Marius Mims, Grant Barton, Tyler Guyton. There's a lot of guys that you can go ahead and pick up at that position. But I think Brock Bowers, it's one of those things, just like Drew was just saying, that when a player falls to you at that spot, you throw out everything else and you draft him anyways. And it's a team you need. Guess what? The Cincinnati Bengals have 0. They have no tight ends on their roster currently. So,
and for anyone that isn't familiar with Brock Bowers has the potential to come into a team and be their number 2 pass catcher next year. And if they're going to move on from T. Higgins, they don't have a tight end on the roster. It actually is a very obvious fit for that team if he lasts that long.
Yeah. I think a place that the Rams are going to go is edge rusher. But I'm not going to go Jared Verse. I'm going to go Laiatu Latu. We've seen the Rams in the past not go with the high athleticism or really care about anything else but a technician, and that's what Latu is he's a technician with his hands. He has a first, a second, and a third move. He has counter moves to your moves. I think this is a guy that's a really good fit for LA, and I think they're really going to like, especially with his medicals coming back cleared for the combine. A couple of guys for the combine worried about medicals. Michael Penix, Latu, they came back cleared and good to go. So I think that's when you take them. And for the 20th pick, before we get your opinion, I'm going to go Nate Wiggins.
Okay, I was just about to say.
You're going corner help for the Pittsburgh Steelers, a guy on the other side of Joey Porter Jr. Long, lengthy. I think he has the best hips in the draft. I don't even think it's really close. He has some injury concerns. If he could stay healthy, then he could be really good. He's a little bit light. He ran a 4.29 at the combine, super speedy. I really like Nate Wiggins, and he's really young too. I think he's 20, right? He's something like 20. He just turned 21. So he just turned 21. Super young guy. You're going to have at 21 for his entire rookie season. So that's my teens. So just as a recap, JJ McCarthy, Byron Murphy, Quinyon Mitchell, Dallas Turner, Cooper DeJean, JC Latham, Jackson Powers Johnson, Brock Bowers, Latu, and Nate Wiggins. What's your thought between picks 11 to 20? Obviously, we mix it up a little bit in this section here.
There's not really anybody there that I don't. Let me put it to you this way. I don't think there's anybody still available that is like a surefire. This guy should have been a top 20. You missed him.
Mm-hmm.
I think you and me haven't touched base on tackle rankings recently. I think Amarius Mims probably has a fit somewhere in the top 20 somewhere, but outside of that, I don't think there's anyone that you're missing right now. I don't think there's like, hey, Jacob, you're an idiot. This player's clearly going to be gone by pick 20.
Yeah. And this isn't my personal rankings either. Like if I'm taking a tackle at, 16, it's not JC Latham. It's Amarius Mims or Troy. Troy's really good too, but I think that the consensus is a little bit higher on JC. So I took JC there. I think Troy Fontano can also go at that spot.
If you're gonna take that player at 16, like for instance, I'm okay with Seattle at 16. I really don't like the pick for the Jaguars at 17. If you're gonna take an offensive lineman in the top 16, I want a player that you can at least try out at tackle. Like we can put JC Latham at tackle, and if it doesn't work out, we know we got a surefire guard. I'm cool with that pick. To take a player that's a surefire inside, interior offensive lineman that high is kind of, but people love Jackson Powers. So I guess it's just one of those things.
Yeah, no, I got you there. And we're not going to stray away from the offensive line here at the Miami Dolphins at pick 21. Just talked about him. Troy Fountain, another guy who has multiple position flexibility, plays tackle, plays guard. He can play whatever you need him to play, and he's going to be there. So I really like him, and I think he's going to be a big time player for the Dolphins that are going to be losing Robert Hunt, and they're going to be losing Connor Williams. You can't bring those guys back most likely because you don't really have the money. You're negative $4 million in the cap space, so you're kind of tied up there, and you're going to need to draft an offensive lineman, especially when you're losing two of your starters. Philadelphia Eagles. I like them too much to put them anywhere else, and I don't care how low they rank them. Kool-Aid McKinstry, probably best press man corner in this draft, and guess what? The Eagles play a ton of press man. I think the only other team that plays a lot of press man as much as they do is the Cowboys, where we play almost exclusively press man, except in the playoffs where we decide to play zone and then we suck. So I think that's probably an issue. Kool-Aid McKinstry to the Eagles. I think it's just a fit.
I think the Eagles would love for one of the top tier corners to fall to them here. I think they would be ecstatic with that.
Yep. And then I'm going to stop the slide here. I can't let Jared Verse fall any further than that. So Jared Verse to the Houston Texans. The Houston Texans should be doing backflips if Jared Verse actually falls to them to this pick at 23. He's a really good player, a lot of use with his hands. He's a powerful player, gets really deep into your chest. Again, the Texans should jump for joy if they get a defensive player like that.
So, well, I told you I wanted them to take Brian Murphy, but if Jared Verse falls to them there, they'll be
just as
ecstatic.
ecstatic. Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. Amarius Mims is one of my favorite players in the draft. So obviously, when you have one of your favorite players in your draft and you have your favorite team coming up, you have to go ahead and take him. Tyron Smith not coming back most likely. You have Terrence Steele that you paid, and he plays like an absolute trash can. Literally one of the worst ranked tackles in the league. You go with a guy who's an athletic freak. I really like this tape. It's not just the athleticism. The tape of Amarius Mims is impressive. If you say, well, he's just an athletic guy. Well, he's not Tyler Guyton. Tyler Guyton has a lot of athleticism, but Amarius Mims is more athletic and he has better tape. That's why I say with Amarius Mims. And pick 25. This is usually where like the popular pick of Cooper DeJean comes in. He usually falls to this spot. Obviously, he's not there. I think you take Johnny Newton, Jerzon Newton here. Interior defensive line help for the Packers is something that's going to be a need. Yes, you have Kenny Clark. Obviously, you picked Devontae Wyatt a couple of years ago, and he hasn't panned out to be the player that you really wanted him to be. Kenny Clark is really the guy who can take up a lot of space, and you want a guy who's a penetrator. Devontae Wyatt was supposed to be that guy. I really liked him coming out of Georgia. Hasn't panned out. Hopefully Johnny Newton does. And
this is a very, very popular pick. Green Bay, a lot of corners here is what I've seen a lot. But the Newton pick is a great fit for what they're trying to do, because they just need to add talent to that defensive side of the ball, because their offense can score. So
absolutely. And man, Tampa Bay Bucks, you know what they need? They just tagged one, but I think they need another one. I am having a safety going in the first round. Tyler Nubin out of Minnesota, big-bodied safety. He's like your true single high guy, but he's so big-bodied you can play him in the box. He's a pretty good tackler as well. I really like Tyler Nubin. I think he's the number one safety pretty handily. The other guy that I think might be close to the number one guy for safety is Cam Kinchins. He could play wherever. I mean, dude had a million snaps in a million different places last year for Florida. So Miami, excuse me. I almost said Florida. I know all the Miami fans probably got a little upset there. So Tyler Nubin to the Bucks gives you a little bit of flexibility with Antoine Winfield. Again, maybe you're on a kind of a borrowing time currently with him being on the franchise tag. And I have Mr. Athleticism coming down. Tyler Guyton going to the Arizona Cardinals at pick 27. Need offensive line help. A guy who's a little bit raw. He's not ready currently right now, but guess what? Neither is your team, and you're ready to go ahead and take a developmental tackle here at this spot who has a lot of potential. I'm not letting any more wide receivers fall at this point. This has to be Brian Thomas to the Buffalo Bills. Speed guy, 6'4". He's like one of three guys over 6'3" to run like a 4.33 40-yard dash of all time. So, and it's not just speed. I think he runs a decent route tree. I think he needs to expand on it a little bit more. But when you're losing a speed guy and a deep threat like Gabe Davis, you replace him with Brian Thomas. I think you're getting a pretty damn good replacement.
Tough roll of the dice for the Detroit Lions to watch Brian Thomas go one pick in front of him.
Yeah, it for sure is. But if you're really looking for speed, which I am, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to grab
Xavier Worthy
for the Detroit Lions.
Xavier Worthy and Amon-Ra St. Brown.
Yep. So again,
I don't even think Jared Goff got enough arm strength for all that speed.
you were wanting Jameson Williams to be the speed guy on your team. I don't.
Spoiler alert: he's not.
He hasn't worked out very well, right? So you come in and you bring Xavier Worthy in to be the speed guy, and it's not just speed; he has the routes to go along with it. I like him at this spot here.
I don't like the way this is breaking.
Now left we have another wide receiver going to be coming off the board right here to the Baltimore Ravens, and it's Keon Coleman. I'm taking Keon Coleman here. A big-bodied wide receiver. I think you have, excuse me. I think you have your guy who can run the underneath. Obviously, Zay Flowers runs a lot of underneath routes. Yes, he can go deep, but a guy who's a contested catch guy. Rashad Bateman is not that guy. He can barely stay on the field as it is. If you want the best contested catch guy in this draft, Keon Coleman is your guy here. And now we're at the Niners. What do they need? They need offensive line help, right? That's even PFF says it, man. They just need, what do you need? O-line. That's it. Doesn't even specify. So a guy who has 5 position flexibility, Graham Barton coming from Duke, going to the Niners again, 5 position flexibility, I think is what the Niners need. And I think this is what they're going to grasp at with Graham Barton. He's another guy who's a little bit more developmental, played a lot of left tackle at Duke, but I think he can slide over and play all 5. And he got snaps at all 5 at the Senior Bowl.
If the 49ers are sitting in this position the way that this broke, I'm going to be screaming at my TV. I'm going to be screaming at you live streaming about a certain guy from Penn State who is setting the world on fire right now. So,
and I have one more wide receiver. Wide receivers flying off the board to Kansas City Chiefs. One of my personal favorites out of the draft, A.D. Mitchell out of Texas. So both Texas wide receivers going in the first round.
For sure.
So just to recap that 21-32 for the people listening, we have Troy I always forget always mess up his name. Fautanu, Kool-Aid McKinstry, Jared Verse, Amarius Mims, Jerzon Newton, Johnny Newton, Tyler Nubin, Tyler Guyton, Brian Thomas, Xavier Worthy, Keon Coleman, Graham Barton, and Kansas City Chiefs rounding it out at A.D. Mitchell. So that's my mock draft. Again, if you want to go ahead and check out Drew's mock draft, it is the mock draft 1.0. Go check it out on the channel. You are missing stuff. Don't say that you're not missing stuff. You're missing stuff if you don't go back to last week and go ahead and click on that mock draft. Give it a thumbs up, just like this video here. We would appreciate that. All right. And that wraps it up for the pod. So
have you done a full 7-round mock draft for the Cowboys yet?
Mm-mm.
I did one the other day. It obviously wasn't very realistic. I somehow managed to draft Brendan Rice, Frank Gore Jr., and Christian McCaffrey's brother. So back to the drawing board. Legacy players. It just doesn't seem like this is the right way to do things.
Oh man, no, that'd be funny. Well, Drew,
they got to draft at least one.
Yeah, I don't know, man. I'm a little up in there on like what we need, because like we need stuff. Obviously, we didn't go as far as we need to. It's like, what do we need? Do we need coaching? Can we draft a coach? Is that possible? So,
how much longer do you think it's going to take for the Dak extension?
Before next week.
Before next week's pod?
Mm-hmm. I think it's going to happen really soon. I think it's going to happen right before the start of free agency.
You think that they would want to lower his cap hit before free agency opens?
Yep. We already picked up Micah Parsons' 5th-year option, and we picked it up would we pick it up as a linebacker or an edge rusher? I don't remember. One of those two has a higher 5th-year option, and we picked up the lower one. So Micah basically like chose the lower one, so we can. It saved us like $3.6 million basically to 5th-year option as the lower price player. So I think that Dak extension is coming really soon.
I don't think it matters, right? He's not going to play on his 5th-year extension.
Probably not.
So it doesn't really matter what you extend him at.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe he will. I don't know. Maybe he really wants to go be a commander.
Yeah, right. Well, Drew, anything to top off the podcast?
No, I mean, I since the Super Bowl, I haven't listened to one 49ers piece of podcast or anything, which is much of my weekly listening. I've been really focused in on the San Francisco Giants and the Sacramento Kings, and I decided to fire up a podcast. These two guys I've been listening to for a long time. Their names are Guy Haberman and John Middlecoff, and John Middlecoff is on the 3 and Out podcast with Colin Cowherd a lot.
Yeah.
And that was their last podcast, and I didn't realize that, but I started listening, and they've both gotten really successful on their own things. So they've been together for 10 years, from Bay Area radio to the podcast, and they just held their last podcast. And this is a podcasting team that's made 7 figures doing what they do. It's what they do. It's what they make. And it just it's kind of upsetting that it was their last one, because it's gotten me through a lot of a lot of tough times in, you know, the last 6 or 7 years, being able to count on them every week. So hopefully somewhere out there we are making someone laugh or smile, or at least if I enrage you with a Justin Fields take, or I enrage you with a Raiders take, at least in that moment of rage where you're mad at me, you forget about something that's not great going on in your life at the time. So hopefully to our 3 viewers, we're at least making you smile, laugh, or cry in some order.
And Drew, beautifully put. We will see you guys next week. As always, we will be live reacting, live streaming, Twitch, YouTube, hopefully maybe even TikTok next time around. So appreciate everyone sticking around to the end. If you did, I will see you guys next week. Peace.
Peace.